Let go of me, Marcus. You're hurting me. Elena's voice cracked as her ex-boyfriend's fingers dug into her arm, shoving her backward against the cold metal of her car. Hurting you? Marcus's laugh was bitter, his breath reeking of alcohol. You think this hurts? You destroyed 3 years of my life, Elena. 3 years. And for what? So you could run away like a coward? The parking lot outside Romano's Italian restaurant was dimly lit, the soft glow from the streetlights casting long shadows between the cars. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to push Marcus away, but his grip only tightened. She could feel the sharp edge of her car door handle pressing into her back. Marcus, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. We broke up 6 months ago. You need to let this go. Let me go. No! His voice exploded in the quiet night air, and he slammed his palm against the car window right next to her head, making her flinch. You don't get to walk away from me again. You don't get to pretend like what we had meant nothing. Elena's green eyes filled with tears, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. What we had was toxic, Marcus. You were controlling, possessive. I loved you, he roared, his face inches from hers now. His sandy brown hair was disheveled, his blue eyes wild with a mixture of rage and desperation. I gave you everything, and you threw it away because you're too weak to handle a real man. The words stung, bringing back all the nights she'd spent doubting herself, wondering if maybe he was right, if maybe she was too sensitive, too difficult to love. But she'd worked too hard in therapy to let him drag her back into that dark place. That wasn't love, Marcus, she said quietly, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. That was possession. And I won't be anyone's property ever again. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She'd seen that look before, right before he'd thrown her favorite mug against the wall, right before he'd grabbed her wrists so hard they'd bruised. You ungrateful little... He raised his hand, and Elena squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for the impact that had become all too familiar during their relationship. But it never came. Instead, she heard Marcus make a strangled sound, followed by a voice that was low, controlled, and absolutely deadly. Touch her again, and die. Elena's eyes snapped open to see a man standing behind Marcus, one strong hand gripping her ex-boyfriend's wrist, in what looked like a casual hold, but was clearly anything but. Marcus's face had gone pale, his arm trembling with the effort of trying to break free. The stranger was tall, easily 6'3", with jet black hair that was perfectly styled despite the late hour. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, and his dark brown eyes held a cold intensity that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. He was wearing an expensive black suit that fitted his broad shoulders and lean frame like it had been tailored specifically for him, which she realized it probably had been. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus sputtered, trying to turn around, but the man's grip kept him facing Elena, kept him trapped. "Wrong question," the stranger replied, his voice carrying just the hint of an accent. Italian, Elena thought. "The question you should be asking is how quickly you can get out of my sight before I decide that breathing is a privilege you no longer deserve." There was something terrifyingly calm about the way he spoke, as if he was discussing the weather rather than making what was clearly a very real threat. Elena found herself pressing back against her car, not out of fear of this mysterious man, but because the power radiating from him was almost overwhelming. Marcus tried to jerk his arm free again, and this time Elena heard him whimper. "Let go of me, you psycho! This is between me and my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," Elena corrected quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. The stranger's eyes flicked to her for just a moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. A softening that was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "You heard the lady," he said, his attention returning to Marcus. "Ex-girlfriend. Which means you have exactly 0 claim to her, 0 right to touch her, and 0 reason to still be breathing my air." With a movement so smooth it looked effortless, he released Marcus's wrist and placed his hand on the center of Marcus's chest instead. Marcus stumbled backward, his eyes wide with a fear Elena had never seen in him before. "This isn't over," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction now. He was backing toward his own car, his movements quick and jerky. "Elena, you'll come crawling back. You always do." The stranger took a single step forward, and Marcus practically ran the rest of the way to his beat-up sedan, fumbling with his keys before diving inside and speeding out of the parking lot with a screech of tires. Elena stood frozen against her car, her heart still racing, unsure whether she should thank this man or be terrified of him. The parking lot felt eerily quiet now, with only the distant sound of traffic from the main road. "Are you hurt?" The stranger's voice was completely different now, gentle, concerned, nothing like the deadly tone he'd used with Marcus. Elena looked down at her arms, where she could already see the red marks that would be bruises by morning. No, not really. I mean, nothing serious." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and intoxicating that made her head spin. "May I see?" It should have been a red flag, another man wanting to touch her after what had just happened. But something in his eyes, something in the way he held himself, respectful, waiting for her permission, made her nod. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he examined the marks on her arms, his touch so light she barely felt it. But she could feel the anger radiating from him as he took in the evidence of Marcus's rough handling. "He's done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena felt heat flush her cheeks, the familiar shame creeping in. It's complicated." "No," he said firmly, his dark eyes meeting hers. "It's not complicated at all. A man who puts his hands on a woman in anger is not a man. He's a coward and a criminal." The certainty in his voice, the complete absence of judgment directed at her, made Elena's eyes fill with tears. "You don't understand. I stayed with him for 3 years. I let it happen. You survived," he corrected gently. "You found the strength to leave. That makes you braver than most people could ever hope to be." Elena stared at him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere like some dark guardian angel. "Who are you?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his stern features into something almost boyish. "Forgive me, Dante Rossini." He extended his hand. "And you are Elena, if I heard correctly." She hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm but careful. "Elena Martinez, thank you for what you did. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't—" "Nothing would have happened," Dante said with absolute conviction. "Because I was there, and now that I know about this situation, it won't happen again." There was something in the way he said it that made Elena believe him completely, even though she had no idea who he was or why he'd been in the parking lot at just the right moment. "Can I buy you coffee?" he asked suddenly. "I know a place that's open late, very quiet. You shouldn't drive just yet, not with your hands shaking like that." Elena looked down and realized he was right. Her hands were trembling, the adrenaline from the confrontation finally catching up with her. "I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't really know you, and after what just happened—" "You're right to be cautious," Dante said, taking a step back to give her more space. "But I give you my word as a gentleman that you would be completely safe with me. And I think you could use someone to talk to right now, someone who won't judge you or ask you to explain choices you made in an impossible situation." Elena studied his face in the dim light. Everything about this man screamed danger, from his perfectly tailored suit to the confident way he carried himself, to the ease with which he'd handled Marcus. But there was something else there too, something that made her feel safer than she'd felt in months. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but somewhere public. And I drive myself." "Of course." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Milano's Cafe on 5th Street. Do you know it?" Elena glanced at the card, which was thick, expensive-looking paper with simply Dante, Rossini, and a phone number embossed in silver. No company name, no title. "I know it. I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. "Perfect." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Elena?" If he contacts you again, calls, texts, shows up anywhere, you call me immediately. Don't hesitate. Don't try to handle it yourself. Promise me." The intensity in his voice made her shiver. "I promise." She watched him walk to a sleek black Maserati parked in the shadows, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. As his car purred to life and pulled out of the parking lot, Elena realized she was still holding her breath. Milano's cafe was exactly the kind of place Elena would have expected a man like Dante to frequent. The interior was all warm wood and soft lighting, with the kind of understated elegance that whispered money rather than shouting it. At this hour it was nearly empty, except for a few other late-night patrons scattered at tables throughout the space. Dante was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table that offered privacy, while still keeping them visible to the rest of the cafe. He stood as she approached, waiting until she was seated before taking his own chair. Old-fashioned manners that should have seemed outdated, but somehow just seemed natural on him. "How are you feeling?" he asked as the waitress brought over 2 cups of coffee without being asked. Apparently, Dante was a regular here. "Like I'm in some sort of strange dream," Elena admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic mug. 6 hours ago, the most exciting thing in my life was deciding whether to watch Netflix or read a book. Now I'm having coffee with a complete stranger who may have saved my life. "I doubt your life was in danger," Dante said, though his expression was grim. "But the situation could have escalated quickly. Men like your ex-boyfriend, they don't usually stop at just intimidation." Elena took a sip of her coffee, surprised to find it was a perfect cappuccino with exactly the right amount of sugar. Somehow Dante had known how she liked her coffee. "How did you know to be there tonight? In the parking lot, I mean. It seems like quite a coincidence." Something flickered across Dante's features, too quickly for her to interpret. "I was having dinner at Romano's. Business meeting. I was leaving when I heard raised voices." It was a reasonable explanation, but Elena got the feeling there was more to it. "What kind of business are you in, Mr. Rossini?" "Import and export," he said smoothly. "Family business. And please, call me Dante." Another non-answer, but Elena decided not to push. This man had helped her when she needed it most. She could respect his privacy. "Tell me about yourself," Dante said, leaning back in his chair. "What do you do when you're not being harassed by pathetic ex-boyfriends?" Elena found herself smiling for the first time all evening. "I'm a librarian at the university. I specialize in historical archives, particularly Italian Renaissance documents." "Interesting," Dante said, and he seemed genuinely intrigued. "So you speak Italian?" "Some. Enough to read the old texts anyway. It's a beautiful language." "Sì, è vero. È una lingua che parla al cuore." "Yes, it's true. It's a language that speaks to the heart." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at the sound of his native language, rich and smooth like aged wine. "Your accent is Northern Italian, isn't it? Lombardy region?" Dante's eyebrows rose. "Very good. Most Americans can't tell the difference between Italian accents. Like I said, I spend a lot of time with historical documents. You pick up on the regional variations." Elena found herself relaxing for the first time in hours. "Have you been in the States long?" "My family moved here when I was 12, Dante said. "But we go back to visit often. Italy it's in the blood, you know? No matter how long you're away, it calls you home." They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing as easily as if they'd known each other for years. Dante was intelligent, well-read, and surprisingly funny when he wanted to be. He asked thoughtful questions about her work, her interests, her dreams for the future, all the things Marcus had never bothered to learn about her in 3 years together. But underneath his charm, Elena could sense something else. A darkness, a carefully controlled power that reminded her that this man was not as simple as he seemed. There were moments when his eyes would grow distant, when she caught glimpses of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. "I should probably get going," Elena said finally, glancing at her phone. "It's getting late, and I have work tomorrow." "Of course," Dante signaled the waitress, who brought over the check. Elena reached for her purse, but he waved her away. Please, allow me. You don't have to. I want to. His tone brooked no argument, but his smile softened the words. It's been my pleasure, Elena. As they walked out to the parking lot together, Elena felt a strange reluctance to end the evening. Despite everything that had happened, despite the questions surrounding this mysterious man, she felt more comfortable with Dante than she had with anyone in a very long time. Will you be all right? Dante asked as they reached her car. Getting home, I mean. I'll be fine, Elena said, though she found herself looking around the parking lot nervously, half expecting Marcus to be lurking in the shadows. Dante seemed to notice her anxiety. What's your address? I'd like to follow you home, just to make sure you arrive safely. Elena hesitated. Giving her address to a stranger went against every safety rule she'd ever learned. But then she thought about Marcus's parting words. This isn't over, and the fear crept back in. Okay, she said finally. But you don't have to come up or anything. Just make sure I get inside, safely. Of course. The drive to Elena's apartment complex was uneventful, but she found herself constantly checking her rearview mirror. Not for Marcus, but to catch glimpses of Dante's sleek car following at a respectful distance. When she pulled into her parking space, he parked nearby and got out to walk her to the building entrance. Thank you, Elena said as she fumbled with her keys, suddenly nervous again. For everything tonight. I don't know how I can repay you. No repayment necessary, Dante said. But Elena, I want you to promise me something. What? Don't dismiss what happened tonight as just a one-time thing. Men like Marcus don't give up easily, especially when they feel they've been humiliated. Be careful, be aware of your surroundings, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me. Elena looked down at the business card still clutched in her hand. I can't ask you to be my personal bodyguard, Dante. You have your own life, your own responsibilities. Something dark and intense flashed in his eyes. Let me worry about my responsibilities. Your safety is now one of them, whether you asked for it or not. The possessiveness in his tone should have set off alarm bells, should have reminded her of Marcus's controlling behavior. But somehow, coming from Dante, it felt different. Protective rather than possessive. Safe rather than suffocating. I should go up, Elena said softly. Yes, you should. But Dante made no move to leave. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Elena, yes? I'm glad I was there tonight. I'm glad I met you. Before she could lose her nerve, Elena rose up on her toes and kissed his cheek. Just a soft brush of lips against skin. But as she started to pull away, Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing along her jawline. Good night, beautiful, he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Then he was walking away, leaving Elena standing in the doorway of her building, with her heart racing and her lips tingling, even though he hadn't actually kissed her. The next few days passed quietly. Elena threw herself into her work at the library, trying to focus on cataloging a new collection of 15th century manuscripts rather than thinking about dark-eyed men in expensive suits. But every time her phone buzzed, every time she heard footsteps behind her on the street, she found herself thinking of Dante's warning about Marcus. She'd almost convinced herself that she was being paranoid when it happened. Elena was leaving the library late on Thursday evening, her arms full of books she was taking home to review, when she noticed the figure leaning against her car. Her blood turned to ice as Marcus straightened up, that familiar, cruel smile spreading across his face. Hello, Elena. Miss me? Elena stopped walking, her mind racing. The parking lot was well lit, but mostly empty at this hour. Her phone was in her purse, buried under the books in her arms. The distance to her car, to Marcus, was about 30 feet. What are you doing here, Marcus? She asked, proud that her voice stayed steady. I wanted to apologize, he said, pushing off from her car and taking a step toward her. The other night, I was drunk out of line. I shouldn't have grabbed you like that. Elena didn't move. Apology accepted. Now please leave. Come on, don't be like that. Marcus took another step closer. I know you, Elena. You're probably beating yourself up about getting that psycho involved in our business. You always were too soft-hearted for your own good. Our business? Elena's voice rose slightly. Marcus, we don't have any business. We're not together anymore. Says who? Marcus's mask of false contrition was starting to slip. You don't get to make that decision unilaterally, Elena. What we have is too important to throw away because you're going through some feminist phase. Elena started backing away slowly, but Marcus matched her movement, maintaining the distance between them. I need you to leave, Marcus. Right now. Or what? You'll call your boyfriend? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think he's going to save you again? He's not here, Elena. Nobody's here except you and me, the way it should be. Elena's hands were shaking now, making the books in her arms rustle. She thought about screaming, but the library was in a quiet part of campus, and most of the evening classes had already ended. The chances of someone hearing her were slim. I know you've been thinking about me, Marcus continued, his voice taking on that wheedling tone she remembered so well. I know you regret the way things ended. We were good together, Elena. We were perfect together until you started listening to those man-hating friends of yours. We were never perfect, Marcus, Elena said, finding a spark of anger to fuel her courage. You were controlling and manipulative and— Shut up! The mask dropped completely now, revealing the rage underneath. I'm trying to be nice here, Elena. I'm trying to give you a chance to come back willingly. But if you keep running your mouth, keep disrespecting me. You'll what? The voice came from behind Elena, cold and deadly familiar. Please finish that thought. I'm fascinated to hear what you think you'll do. Elena spun around to see Dante emerging from the shadows between the cars, and the relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her knees weak. He was dressed casually tonight, dark jeans and a black sweater, but he looked no less dangerous than he had in his expensive suit. You, Marcus spat. How did you— What are you, stalking her or something? I'm protecting her, Dante replied calmly, moving to stand beside Elena. His presence immediately made her feel safer, more grounded. Something you made necessary with your inability to understand the word no. This is harassment, Marcus said, but Elena could hear the fear creeping into his voice. I'll call the police. Please do. Dante pulled out his phone and held it out toward Marcus. I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear about your pattern of stalking and intimidating your ex-girlfriend. Tell me, how many restraining orders have been filed against you over the years? Marcus's face went pale, and Elena realized that Dante had somehow learned things about her ex that even she didn't know. Elena, get in your car, Dante said without taking his eyes off Marcus. I'll handle this. I'm not leaving you here with him, Elena said, surprising herself with her vehemence. Dante glanced at her, and she saw something warm and proud flicker in his dark eyes. Then we'll leave together. Marcus, you have 5 seconds to get in your car and drive away. If I see you within 100 yards of Elena again, if you call her, text her, or so much as think about her too hard, I will make you disappear. Do you understand me? There was something in Dante's tone that made the threat sound very, very real. Marcus apparently thought so too, because he practically ran to his car, stumbling over his own feet in his haste to get away. As soon as Marcus's taillights disappeared from view, Elena felt her knees give out. Dante caught her before she could fall, his strong arms steadying her as the books scattered across the asphalt. It's okay, he murmured, his voice gentle now. You're safe. I've got you. How did you know? Elena asked, her face pressed against his chest. How did you know he'd be here? She felt Dante tense slightly. I've been having you watched, he admitted, discreetly. I told you men like him don't give up easily. Elena pulled back to look at him, unsure whether to be grateful or alarmed. Watched by whom? People who work for me, Dante said carefully. People who know how to stay invisible until they're needed. There were so many questions Elena wanted to ask, but the most important one came out first. Why? Why would you do that for someone you barely know? Dante's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. Because the moment I saw him put his hands on you, you became mine to protect. I know that sounds archaic, probably sounds crazy, but it's the truth. Dante, Elena whispered, overwhelmed by the intensity in his eyes. I know it's too much. Too fast, he continued. I know you barely know me. No, you have no reason to trust me. But Elena, what I feel for you, it's not something I can just turn off and walk away from. Before Elena could respond, before she could overthink it or talk herself out of it, she rose up on her toes and kissed him. Really kissed him this time, her lips meeting his with all the gratitude and growing affection and desperate need for connection that had been building inside her since the night they met. Dante made a sound low in his throat, his arms tightening around her as he deepened the kiss. His lips were warm and soft and perfect, moving against hers with a gentleness that contrasted beautifully with the controlled strength she could feel in his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me, he said softly. Not for... just to be safe. To be somewhere he can't find you while I make sure this problem gets permanently solved. Elena knew she should say no. Should insist on going to her own apartment, on handling this herself like the independent woman she'd worked so hard to become. But she was tired of being afraid, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of dealing with Marcus's obsession alone. Okay, she whispered. But I want to know who you really are, Dante. All of it. Something flickered across his features. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. All of it might be more than you're ready to hear. Try me. Dante's house was not what Elena had expected. She'd imagined something sleek and modern, all glass and steel and sharp edges. Instead, he led her up the driveway of a beautiful Mediterranean-style villa, complete with climbing vines and a fountain in the circular drive. It's gorgeous, Elena said as they walked up the front steps. It looks like something straight out of Tuscany. That was the idea, Dante replied, unlocking the front door. My mother designed it. She wanted to recreate the feeling of the family home back in Italy. The interior was just as stunning. Warm terracotta walls, exposed wooden beams, and enough old-world charm to make Elena's heart ache with longing for places she'd never been. Your mother has exquisite taste, Elena said, following Dante into a cozy living room dominated by a massive stone fireplace. Had, Dante corrected quietly. She passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Elena touched his arm gently. Were you close? Very. Dante moved to the bar cart in the corner of the room. Wine? I have an excellent Chianti. That sounds perfect. Elena settled onto the plush leather sofa, curling her legs under her as she watched Dante pour 2 glasses of deep red wine. In the soft lamplight, he looked younger somehow, less intimidating, more human. So, she said as he handed her a glass and sat down beside her, are you going to tell me who you really are? Dante was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. What do you know about organized crime in America, Elena? Elena's breath caught. I know enough. Why? Because my family has been involved in it for 4 generations. Dante's voice was carefully neutral, as if he was discussing the weather rather than confessing to criminal activity. My great-grandfather came over from Sicily in 1924 and built an empire that my grandfather and father expanded throughout the Northeast. Elena set her wine glass down with trembling fingers. You're in the Mafia. I prefer the term family business, Dante said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. But yes, that's the common term for what we do. A dozen different emotions crashed through Elena at once. Fear, confusion, attraction, and strangely, a kind of relief that finally made sense of all the mystery surrounding him. Is that how you knew about Marcus's history? She asked. How you knew he'd had restraining orders filed against him? Among other things. Dante turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching her face. Elena, I understand if this changes things between us. I understand if you want me to take you home right now and never contact you again. Most people can't handle this kind of truth. Elena looked at him, this man who had literally appeared out of nowhere to protect her, who had shown her more kindness and genuine care in a week than Marcus had in 3 years, who was now sitting here, confessing his darkest secrets because she'd asked him to be honest with her. What exactly does your family business involve? She asked. Import and export, like I told you. Some of it is even legitimate. Dante's smile was self-deprecating. We also provide certain services to people who need problems solved discreetly. Protection, mediation, debt collection. Sometimes the methods are unconventional. Do you hurt people? Dante was quiet for a long moment. I've done things I'm not proud of, Elena. I won't lie to you about that. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Never hurt anyone innocent. And Marcus? Marcus will disappear from your life permanently, Dante said, his voice taking on that deadly edge Elena had heard before. How permanently depends on whether he's smart enough to take the hint. Elena should have been terrified. Should have run screaming from this beautiful house, and this dangerous man who casually talked about making people disappear. Instead, she found herself thinking about all the nights she'd lain awake afraid that Marcus would show up at her door, all the times she'd looked over her shoulder walking to her car, all the ways his obsession had stolen her peace of mind. Elena, Dante's voice was gentle, concerned. Talk to me. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking, Elena said slowly, that I should be afraid of you right now. But you're not. No, I'm not. She looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, fascinating man. I should be running for the door, calling the FBI, putting as much distance between us as possible. But you're not, Dante repeated, and there was something hopeful in his voice now. No, I'm not. Elena picked up her wineglass again, taking a sip to fortify herself. I'm thinking that you've been more honest with me in 1 week than Marcus was in 3 years. I'm thinking that you've made me feel safer than I've felt in months, even though you're apparently one of the most dangerous men I could possibly be involved with. Elena, I'm not finished. She held up her hand, and Dante fell silent. I'm thinking that maybe I'm tired of playing it safe. Maybe I'm tired of predictable men who seem normal on the surface but turn out to be monsters underneath. Maybe I'd rather be with a man who's honest about his darkness than one who hides it behind a facade of respectability. Dante set his wineglass down and moved closer to her on the couch, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I want to see where this goes, Elena whispered. I'm saying that I trust you, Dante Rossini, even though every logical part of my brain is screaming that I shouldn't. Logic is overrated, Dante murmured, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Sometimes you have to trust your heart instead. And what is my heart telling me? You tell me. Elena looked into his dark eyes, saw the vulnerability there beneath all that controlled strength, and made her choice. It's telling me to stop overthinking everything and kiss you again. Dante's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Your heart gives excellent advice. This kiss was different from the one in the parking lot, deeper, more intense, full of promise and possibility. Elena could taste the wine on his lips, could feel the restrained power in his hands as they tangled in her hair. When his tongue swept against hers, she made a small sound of pleasure that seemed to drive him wild. Elena, he whispered against her lips. Mia bella Elena. What does that mean? My beautiful Elena. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. It means you're mine now, if you want to be. It means I'll protect you with everything I have, for as long as you'll let me. And what if I want forever? Elena asked boldly, surprising herself with her own courage. Then forever is what you'll get, Dante promised, sealing the words with another kiss that left Elena breathless, and wanting more. 6 months later, Elena stood in the garden of Dante's villa, surrounded by white roses and fairy lights, wearing a dress that had been her grandmother's, and a smile that hadn't left her face all day. The small gathering of friends and family watched as Dante slipped a ring onto her finger, his own eyes suspiciously bright as he promised to love and protect her for all the days of their lives. Marcus had disappeared from her life completely after that night in the parking lot, just as Dante had promised. Elena never asked what had happened to him, and Dante never volunteered the information. Some things, she'd learned, were better left unknown. As her new husband kissed her in the golden light of the setting sun, Elena thought about how dramatically her life had changed since that terrifying night when she'd thought her ex-boyfriend might actually hurt her. She'd been rescued by a dark angel in an expensive suit, and somehow, impossibly, she'd found her happily ever after, with the most dangerous man she'd ever met. "No regrets?" Dante whispered against her ear as their guests cheered around them. "None," Elena whispered back, meaning it completely. "You?" "Only that it took me 35 years to find you," Dante replied, spinning her around in his arms. "But I'd wait another 35 if it meant getting to spend forever with you." As night fell over their wedding celebration, Elena Martinez Rossini danced with her husband under the stars, surrounded by the kind of love she'd never believed she deserved, protected by a man who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was perfect in ways she never could have imagined. And if sometimes she caught glimpses of the darkness that lived alongside Dante's love for her, well, everyone had their secrets. Some people's secrets just happened to be more dangerous than others. But Elena had learned that sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the right one. Sometimes you had to trust your heart over your head. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the man who saved you from your nightmares turned out to be the one you'd been dreaming of all along. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, because I am trying to prove to my mom that I can actually do this. It would mean the world to me. I love you all. Have a nice day.